Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And seeing as just recently we'd done something about how to draw feet using very simple shapes and guides, especially the soles of the feet, I thought today we could move a little bit further up the body and start to incorporate all of these things together, feet and legs, especially when you've got poses for your anime and manga characters which are quite feet and leg focused. Maybe we've got a lot of bent knees going on, so we need to take a look at how the leg bends around the kneecap using some very simple shapes only. It's basic stuff here, and really just drawing things together for characters in your anime and manga style that might just be leaning back and reclining a bit more. This is going to work for any form of character illustration regardless of what you're up to, so if you do want to follow along at home, grab yourself a few sheets of printer paper. That's all I've got here, it's all I need. A super disposable cheap mechanical pencil, it's basically just a 2B. Grab anything you have, and on the back of this I've got a convenient eraser, or rubber as we call them in England, but whenever I say that I use a rubber to make sure I don't make mistakes, that kind of sounds like something different for you guys in the States. So let's just dive straight in. I've got a spare scrap of paper here just to rest my hand on, really, so that I don't kind of mark and smudge the paper with any natural oils and greases. Just keeps things nice and clean, even if they're all fresh and washed. And what I'm going to do firstly is just sketch out very loosely a building blocks character just down this side, who's got maybe one leg straight and one leg bent. And then we're going to look at that from a much kind of foot focused angle to have the same pose in the legs, but just see how everything foreshortens. So it's going to make sense as I go. I'm going to start with a very loose flow line. You'll notice my hand is really far up this pencil. If you're following along at home, we're not trying to perfectly draw these single straight or curved lines and really nail it down. It's all about just getting a loose bit of flow and a loose bit of curve. I'm going to work a little bit darker than I usually do so that it shows up for you guys at home. We're just going to follow this line a little bit, and now on top of that I'm going to just kind of put in the building blocks. So as you guys know, let's just throw a shoulder line out here for the top part of our character, and then as I make my way a little less than halfway down, I'm just going to throw a hip line in. I'm going to make it contrapposto, as in these two lines are not parallel, which is always a nice way to add dynamics, and this flow line down here is just going to help guide for me what I want to be doing with our slightly straighter leg here. And then I'm going to have a slightly more bent leg kind of coming up towards us. We'll imagine that this character is leaning back a bit or lying back on the floor. It's going to come up towards us about here, then drop away about there, and then we're going to build this up. So I'm just going to start with maybe putting a head on our character vaguely up here. Now I have done a much more detailed tutorial on all of the exact shapes that I'm using for the building blocks of our characters, so this isn't going to be perfect. It's going to be very rough around the edges just to give you an idea of some form and shape, just so that these tutorials don't end up being super long. So I'm just kind of roughly scratching in all of these kind of shapes and designs, a little bit of coming up the cheeks there, maybe our brow line of this character, somewhere across our top building block circle there. So I'll just put in some paddle shaped ears just to give it a little bit of design. Then I'm going to follow that line down, pretending it's part of the spine. Let's have our neck going in this character there, and we'll look a tiny bit down on top of the chest, but then a bit flatter as the kind of curve of the hips and the leg goes flat. So I'm just going to use that kind of rough chest shaped building block there, a little bit stubbier because we are looking a little bit further down, just like so. I'm going to imagine the center lines vaguely around the front, just carve out another curve that goes the other way from the bottom to give it that rib cage feel. And then of course when it comes to the hips, another nice big ellipse that might just sweep round like so. Again, I'm just keeping this relatively light but a bit firmer, and then I'm just going to triangle in just like this, just to show how everything meets together at the bottom, and then just drawing up ever so slightly around by describing the tummy shape as it comes in just a little bit and then sweeps around for this kind of bucket shape near the front. This is the lower part of the abdomen as it meets into the hips, back up around here, and then up where I've got my shoulder line. And again, this isn't important too much. This isn't what we're focusing on, but let's just get some shoulder circles in. One there and one there. Join them up a little bit. at the back where we've got the traps, start to join things down here where we've got the obliques. Because we've got this hip coming up in here, it's going to trap in a little bit of flesh just down there before it goes over the harder edge of the hip there. Firm line for the hip there, but the obliques down the side there. Then we've got a line across from the shoulders where the boob line is going to go below. We're not really focusing on that today. And then I'm just going to have these arms going down and back just to show that this character's pushing themselves up, supporting their weight in a foreshortened manner. So the top part of the arm here is a cylinder that's just dropping away from us here. Trying to think about these shapes in 3 dimensions wherever possible. Forearm section then bulging out just a little bit before it sweeps down there. Same down here. And then we might have the hands just splaying away outward in this manner. And again, keeping that nice and simple. Let's have a thumb shape off there. The fingers splaying out just like so. So again, my apologies, this isn't going to be perfect. I'm all about just making it as quick as possible. Let's paddle off from this central shape, and of course fingers following the way up there, keeping the 2 fingers in the middle together, and then the lead and the smaller finger just kind of separating out, just a common thing that's nice to do. I'm just going to hang a tiny bit of boob just coming down there, just like so, and just like so. Again, all of this we've got in other tutorials where I kind of go into a bit more detail. And now actually let's take a look at those legs. So with this kind of leg sweeping down here, I might just kind of stop very briefly and tell myself the knee's going to be about there, but I'm going to be following a line that just comes out nice and early at this point over the top part of the thigh. This is where I've got most of my curve. Then I'm sweeping down into a straighter line, and again, because this is all the rough building blocks and it's just for guidelines, my hand is still really far up this pencil. I'm still trying to keep it loose. It's later on where I firm up these lines and really settle down with some final decisions that I can get very specific and move my hand back up. But for now, up here is great and it allows more flow. So I'm just sweeping a line that comes in around about here. Here's going to be our knee, so a large circle for the moment just to indicate where that is, and then the legs just coming up on this inside edge and just meeting back up against the main area of the hips themselves. Just a little bit of thigh gap on the inside edge there, but if we come back down this leg, now I might just sweep out over the calf muscle just to get the curve going in, but I'm really just following this kind of feeling all the way down. If this leg is a little bit turned in, this line here is going to catch and bump here for the knee just a little bit, keeping this character relatively slim compared to my usual ones. And then a circle here for where the ankle's going to be. And we might just have a foot that's just a little bit foreshortened as it's going up towards us. So I'm imagining a paddle shape for the base. This is where we've come into the tutorials before. And then I've got a section for the top of the foot as it sweeps down, becomes the end of a foot, which can be divided into our little toes and our big toes, something like that to keep it nice and simple and easy. Maybe I'm going to have a bit of the heel coming off the back just there, and then we've got a little lump for the ankle on that side, a bit higher on the inside edge. So if this leg is just going down relatively flat like so, and we've got the knee just popping there as everything joins together, then this leg that's coming up towards us is going to have a lot of foreshortening going on, but continue to have the same kind of width of curves and so on. So I might go to the very end of this joint here, put another very similar circle in and say, okay, here's our knee as it's coming up towards us. And then I might sweep round very generously to start to get a curve, which is going to be the thigh coming towards us, the viewer. So I might bring that right around and in like so. And I'll just kind of mark the edge of this surface to show, okay, this is a cylinder essentially that's coming towards us that stays very meaty on top, comes up and around. And maybe if I'm sweeping down and around past the shin, this kneecap area, which is this circle here, I'm going to just decide where the top front part of that is. And then I'm going to build a shape, another cylinder that's thick around the calves certainly, hooks round for more of a curve on the outside edge than it does the inside, but starts to sweep down again to what might be where the ankle is, around about there. And then on this side, just going to bring it down a little bit straighter, like so. And again, let's just give that another surface curve to give you an idea of what's going on. And then in this instance, we might have a flatter foot, something like so, on the floor. And again, this is where we're just kind of using those shapes. So we've got a bit of ankle that's here and here. With our feet, we've got like a curve that comes round very nicely here and just dents a little bit on the inside there. Much like we've got here, here's the highest part of our foot. Here's where everything is leveling out. And here on the end, we might just have our toes. And I just roughly separate out the smaller toes to the big ones until we get a bit more toe focused. So basically, guys, if this is what we've got going on with a top view, and I'm just going to thicken out, I think, the inside edge of this leg here. That's just going to make this both feel relatively even in terms of thigh meatiness, a very important part of anime. And I'm just, one of my favorite things, just following a abdomen line here, a center line that goes down the front of the body, helps me understand exactly where these shapes are going. Now let's take a look at that as if our viewpoint is a little bit lower and looking a bit more up towards the character to talk about these kind of shapes and how these legs are working bent at the knee. So let's just see if we can fit that in here. I'm going to go ahead and very, very lightly just think of the same two things again. We've got the spine line, like so, a shoulder line that's not going to be very important in this instance, somewhere up here, and then I've got the hips that are going to be somewhere across here. Now I'm going to start with the nearest part of the body towards me first this time, which is the hips, but because a lot of this is going to be covered up with the thigh and the legs, I'm not going to make these too dark, just so that they don't over confuse the image. But let's just get some hips in there. And then we've got our chest egg shape coming up here somewhere. And as we're looking up at this, the curve of the ribs is just going to be a little bit more, it's just going to travel a little bit higher, I should say. There we go, into the rib area. And then we've got the abdominal wall coming down here and meeting what appears to be a very shallow part into the ribs, because actually if you imagine this as a box, this box, or the bottom part, is kind of facing towards us, like so. Just sketch that in very lightly, and then the front part of that box, the front part of the body, is just tapering away like so. It's very nice sometimes, especially when you're working with these circular forms, to box in the chest circle, box in the hip circle. It just helps you understand the angle that everything else is working in at. So let's just come here, just put that there and there. And what I'm going to do is just from the outside edges, from where we've got the hip bones really starting to kick in, I might just pull a line straight in here and curving in down here. The part that's kind of most towards us here are going to be the private areas, which we can just kind of summarize with a bit of the lips. But most of this isn't going to be visible, as we're going to just have this sweeping leg action. So let's start again very lightly with the leg that's coming down a bit more directly towards us, this one. I'm going to be able to just foreshorten that a lot now. I'm just going to sweep out the widest part just to about here. It's going to stop just above the knee for me, just about there. And it meets in, as you can see, just on this inside edge, so that we've still got this gap in the middle, the center part of the undercarriage, and then sweeping back over like so. So let's get this around there. A bit of an edge line just to show again, big old cylinder coming towards us. There's all sorts of different areas of muscle that you can start to pick out with the leg. There's four main big guys that are kind of doing all of the joint pulling across the front and sides, but really just a cylinder that's thicker at the top and thinner as it tapers towards the knee. You can't go too wrong. But what about this guy that's coming up towards us in this image? Well, it's going to be going up and kind of towards us, but a little bit sort of parallel to our view. So if I imagine the socket of that leg is around about here into the hips, I'm going to bring a guiding line that comes right up and across, around about here, and then I'm going to come right down again, just like so, for the area of the shin that's going to be kind of coming flat on. So again, very, very lightly, but I'm going to start with a big curve for the bum, a generous curve as we come out across these hips and up towards a kneecap center circle of sorts. So let's imagine that there. And from this point, I can start to have a straighter line that then sweeps out for that part of the thigh. And then on this edge, it's going to do something very similar. It sweeps out and just meets in like that. But because we've got this knee right up and being one of the main focal points, on this circle, I'm going to imagine a flatter circle, I should say, on top of the sphere, which is going to be our kneecap area. And then the lower part of the leg isn't going to be right from the center. It's going to hang from the bottom part of this circle and come down towards us. So if this curve is coming up here, then really the rest of the leg is going to sweep down from just underneath as we make our way down here. And again, I'm starting just about down here for this cylinder. Don't worry, I'm going to firm this up a lot so it's nice and clear for you guys. But this kind of cylinder that follows that line is going to sweep out again nicely for the calf muscle. Excellent. But then taper right down for where the leg meets the shin. And I'm just going to draw this in a little bit firmer right now. I'm going to tidy all these up in time lapse just to show this separate area that I'm just describing ever so slightly like this, meeting up into the knee. Here comes the top of the kneecap area down there, and then obviously following down this leg and that surface down there. And then once we've got this in place, again, I can start to drop this out into the heel and maybe just sweep this foot in somewhere like that. So I'm just going to have the top part sweeping down into the front part, get that little wedge shape going. If the heel is there and our ankles are here, this one's a little bit higher, then I might just have some sweep outs, then our little toes, then our big toe, just like this, and then just coming around that whole ball of the foot area before it curves back up and in. So this is just showing us the top surface area of the foot. And obviously I can start to pick these out into separate toes. Again, I'll worry about that in time lapse. Let's just put a little cross in here just to show what on earth we're doing over that leg. And then what I'm going to do, guys, so that hopefully you can see where this leg is coming towards us. We've got a little bit of the underside of the bum sweeping round up here. This is all the thigh coming up towards us. The big circle of the knee is going to be on top of everything. Then this leg is hanging down from that knee regardless as it comes back towards us. I'm just going to fill up the body a little bit by a tiny bit of obliques up there, sweeping up that chest a bit more. Let's get some shoulders back up there somewhere, not too important, just a habit. And then maybe we've got like a neckline just coming off there. Headless chickens today for the rest of the form. So what I'm going to do, guys, just so that this video doesn't become too long, is I'm going to drop in a little bit of time lapse, have another kind of both legs up pose around about here, maybe something both leg bent in the side. Try to see if I can fit something small in the bottom gap. I'm always trying to think in my head how I'm going to fill up the page for you. And then I'll see you guys right in the end where we're actually going to be talking about the order that I do things and what's being focused. With the next one that goes here, I'm going to place the body, but then I'm probably going to start with the feet and work my way back because they're foreshortened right towards us and covering everything else. I'll see you then. Hey guys, and welcome back. So yeah, just wanted to run through a number of different examples here. Before I talk through them, it's always worth adding that if you'd like to grab this particular worksheet, I'm adding it to my tutorials work pack on Patreon, so you can grab this and all the other tutorial sheets just for $1 if you're ever interested. Links, of course, in the description below. But really what I wanted to just focus on is two main points. When it came to actually drawing up the feet on this particular character here, this is a pose where we're kind of looking at the bottom part of the bucket of the hips up towards a foreshortened body with the feet in the foreground. So when I mapped this out, I had a very loose idea of where the body was going to be, just the overall mass, and then actually I started with the kind of wedge shape of the feet that we talked about in the feet tutorial a couple episodes ago. And then, once I had the basic details in, I worked back up to where I wanted the knees to be, and then joined it by just these curves of the thigh that meet their way back down to either side of the torso there. So when it comes to very foreshortened parts like this, I want to start at the nearest element and just work my way back towards the body. It's the only time I really tend to work in reverse. Otherwise, it's head, body, and then limbs. But just like down here, I've done a very similar thing. I had some guidelines that told me, okay, I'm just going to be making my way into legs that are just tucked up and in like that. This leg is obviously coming down with the foot up towards us, and this one is coming with the foot down. They're relatively the same length, always judging it by eye. But the main thing here that I might not have described just as clearly as I'd want to here is what we're doing with that difficult knee area. So as we go up and in, I've got a circle which is trying to describe a relatively flat surface for the kneecap and where things are just kind of rounding off. And you'll notice that it kind of drops down and almost tucks back in a little bit for this kind of lever action as it goes down into the shin of the lower part of the leg. And it just widens out into the thigh because there's plenty of meat and tendon and structure on either side of the knee joint as the legs kind of join together. So here we've got maybe that slightly flattened top edge, the overall knee shape just dipping in. Here I've just kind of described it a bit more in a hinge action, just so that it really works out visually when you're trying to kind of understand what's going on with your own character's legs. And then a little bit of a view from more of the underneath, and really just the main thing here. Feet are a nightmare, always trying to work them out, but also when we've got the calves curving off to the underside of the knee, I'm not worrying too much about any structure here. I'm just getting that curve hard line all the way around, maybe stopping about there, and that's just telling me that that part of the flesh is just meeting into the thigh itself. So guys, I really hope you found today's tutorial to be useful when it comes to actually drawing up your characters in different poses, but also really just kind of understanding, right, okay, I understand the foot, how does it join into the leg? And when I've got these different poses and legs tucked up with my characters, how is all of that structure going to work together in a way that it still reads clearly as 3 dimensions? And that's why mapping the surfaces all the time can really help you with your own form and your characters at home. And of course, guys, all of these tutorials are free for you on YouTube. I don't have any courses, I don't charge you guys anything because I simply want you to get into drawing. But the only reason that is possible is thanks to those delicious patrons on Patreon. You saw some of their names just a moment ago, and a quick shout out to last month's patrons as well, including Melissa, Brendan J, Hamongchi L, Danny S, Cairo N, and Justin J. Thank you very much for your support, guys. As for the rest of you, get yourself in the comment section below. Let me know what tutorials you'd like to see in the future. And if you'd like to grab this work pack again, you can just get it for $1 on Patreon. Right, much love you guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care.